Dr. Sarah Chun rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the glowing screens around her. She had been working for 16 hours straight in the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Luna. The moon base was quiet at this hour. Most of the other scientists had gone to sleep hours ago. Sarah was the head of the Alien Signal Research Team. For 12 years, she had been listening to space, hoping to find proof that humans were not alone in the universe. Every day she checked thousands of radio signals from distant stars. Most of them were just natural sounds from space, dead star noise, solar wind static. Nothing special. But tonight was different. The main computer started beeping with an urgent sound she had never heard before. Red lights flashed across her control panel. Sarah sat up straight and put down her coffee cup. Her heart began to beat. Faster? Computer, what is the alert status? She asked. Dr. Chun, we are receiving an unknown quantum-encrypted transmission from the Kepler-442 system. Signal strength is impossible according to current physics models. The transmission is actively bypassing our standard filters. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. Kepler-442 was over 1,000 light-years away from Earth. No known technology could send a signal that far and still be this strong. She pulled up the signal analysis on her main screen. The wave patterns were unlike anything in their database. They pulsed with mathematical precision that could only come from intelligent life. This was not a natural space sound. Someone or something was trying to talk to them. Wake up the entire night team, Sarah ordered, and send an emergency message to Director Williams. Tell him we need him here right now. Within 20 minutes, the monitoring station was full of excited scientists. Director Williams arrived wearing his pajamas under a lab coat. Everyone gathered around Sarah's workstation as she played the signal through the speakers. The sound was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It had musical qualities like a song, but underneath was something desperate, something afraid. How long have we been receiving this? Williams asked. The signal started 3 hours ago, Sarah replied, but here is the strange part. The computer says the signal is not just reaching us through normal space. It is somehow using quantum tunneling to punch through barriers that should be impossible to cross. Dr. Martinez, their best codebreaker, was already working on the signal patterns. I think I can decode this, he said. The mathematical base seems to be built on prime numbers, just like we would expect from an intelligent species trying to communicate. For the next 4 hours, the team worked to break down the alien message. Slowly, piece by piece, they began to understand what they were hearing. The signal was a distress call. My God, Martinez whispered as he read his translation. They are asking for help? Something called the Zephyrion Collective is under attack. They say their entire species is about to die. Sarah felt cold fear run down her spine as Martinez continued reading the decoded message. The aliens described an enemy they called the Void Swarm, something that ate entire worlds and turned them into more of itself. The message said this swarm was moving through space, destroying everything in its path. There is more, Martinez said, his voice shaking. They detected military signals from our solar system. They think humans might be the only species that can fight this thing. They are begging us to help them. Director Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that Sarah had never heard him use before. This is Williams at Luna Station. We need to activate the Antarctic protocols immediately. Yes, I know what time it is. This is a code black situation. Sarah had never heard of Antarctic protocols or code black situations. She looked at the other scientists, but they seemed just as confused as she was. Williams hung up the phone and turned to face the team. His expression was serious and frightened. Everyone in this room needs to sign new security papers. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Dr. Chen, your signal has done more than just contact. Aliens. It has somehow penetrated the security systems of our most secret military project. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself on a military transport plane flying toward Antarctica. She sat next to Williams, who had been making phone calls the entire flight. She could only hear pieces of his conversations, but the words she caught made her nervous. Words like awakening sequence and Dreadworld protocols and the hunters are coming back. The plane landed at a research station that looked normal from the outside. But when they went through the main building, Sarah saw that it was just a cover. Elevators took them deep underground, past layers of ice and rock, down to levels that officially did not exist. The underground facility was massive. Hallways stretched for miles in every direction. Military personnel moved with urgent purpose. Sarah saw scientists in lab coats working next to soldiers in black uniforms she did not recognize. Williams led her to a secure briefing room where a woman in an admiral's uniform was waiting for them. The nameplate on her desk said Admiral Catherine Hayes. "Dr. Chun," the admiral said, "your alien signal has awakened something that has been sleeping for 20 years. Something that we hoped we would never need to use again." Admiral Hayes pressed a button on her desk. The lights in the room dimmed. A holographic display appeared in the center of the table. Sarah saw images of planets that looked like hell itself. Worlds covered in acid storms. Frozen wastelands where the wind could cut through metal. Desert planets where the sand was made of tiny glass knives. "These are the Dreadworlds," Admiral Hayes explained. "The most dangerous planets humans have ever found. Places where normal people would die in minutes. 30 years ago, we sent volunteers to these worlds. People who agreed to live there for years, alone, learning how to survive impossible conditions." Sarah stared at the images. Why would anyone volunteer for that? "Because we needed to create the perfect soldiers," Hayes replied. "People who could think like predators, who could survive anything, who could kill things that should not be able to die. We called them the Dreadworld Hunters." The hologram changed to show 10 sleeping chambers. Inside each chamber was a person floating in some kind of preservation fluid. They looked human, but Sarah could see scars and modifications that spoke of years spent in places no human was meant to live. "Your alien signal somehow bypassed our quantum locks," Hayes continued. "It triggered their awakening protocols. For the first time in 20 years, the hunters are coming back to consciousness." Sarah watched as medical technicians began the revival process. Slowly, the fluid drained from the chambers. The people inside began to move. "What are you going to do with them?" Sarah asked. Admiral Hayes looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "We are going to give them the coordinates to Kepler 442, and then we are going to send them to save an alien species from something that could destroy our entire galaxy." The first hunter opened his eyes. Even through the glass of his chamber, Sarah could see intelligence that seemed almost inhuman. These were not normal soldiers. They were something else entirely. Something that humanity had created by forcing people to become more than human. Sarah realized that the alien distress call had done more than ask for help. It had awakened Earth's most dangerous weapons. And now those weapons were going to be pointed at something that even aliens could not fight. The chamber door opened with a hiss of escaping gas. The first hunter stepped out and looked around the room. When his eyes met Sarah's, she felt like she was being examined by a predator that was deciding whether she was food or friend. "How long have we been asleep?" the hunter asked. His voice was calm, but Sarah heard something underneath it that made her want to run away. 20 years, Admiral Hayes replied. The hunter smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Good, we were getting bored." Captain Marcus Rivera was the first hunter to fully wake up. He stepped out of his chamber and stretched muscles that had been frozen for 20 years. His body was covered in scars that told stories of survival on worlds where everything wanted to kill him. The biggest scar ran across his chest, a reminder of the acid-spitting creatures on Thanatos. Prime, Marcus looked around the awakening chamber and saw his old team coming back to life. Each chamber was opening with a soft hiss. One by one, the other hunters emerged from their long sleep. Elena Volkov came out of her chamber next. Her hair was white as snow, not from age but from the extreme cold of Hell's Gate where she had spent 3 years. The cold planet had changed her in ways that went deeper than appearance. She could see heat patterns with her naked eyes now, and her body temperature was always several degrees lower than normal humans. Chun Liu stepped from his chamber and immediately closed his eyes. He was feeling for something that normal people could not sense. On Psy-World Omega, he had learned to detect the thoughts and emotions of others. The psychic predators on that world had forced him to develop mental shields and abilities that made him seem almost alien himself. One by one, the other 7 hunters awakened. Each one bore the marks of their Dreadworld training. Jackson Torres had skin that could resist radiation after years on the nuclear wasteland of Gamma-7. Maria Santos moved like liquid shadow, trained by the light-hunting creatures of the Darkside planet. Admiral Hayes watched them with a mixture of respect and fear. These people had volunteered to be changed into something beyond normal human limits. They had paid the price in pain and isolation, but they had become the deadliest fighters humanity had ever created. "Hunters," Admiral Hayes called out, "please gather for briefing. We have a situation that requires your unique skills." The 10 hunters moved to the briefing table without speaking to each other. They did not need words. After years of surviving alone on nightmare worlds, they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other during their brief training together before the Dreadworld missions. Marcus looked at the Admiral and spoke for the group. "What woke us up?" "The sleep systems were set for indefinite suspension. An alien distress signal somehow bypassed our quantum security," Hayes explained. "It triggered your awakening protocols automatically." She activated the holographic display. The room filled with images of the decoded alien message. The hunters watched without emotion as the translation played out. They saw pictures of crystalline beings whose entire civilization was being destroyed by something called the Void Swarm. Elena leaned forward as the images showed the destruction. Entire planets were being consumed and converted into more of the swarm. Solar systems that had existed for billions of years were disappearing in months. "Show us the tactical data," Chung requested. His psychic abilities allowed him to sense the fear and desperation in the alien message. Even through the translation, Admiral Hayes brought up new displays, showing what little the aliens had been able to observe about their enemy. The Void Swarm appeared to be made of creatures that existed partially outside normal space. They could phase through solid matter when needed, but became solid enough to tear apart anything they touched. "The swarm learns from everything it consumes," Hayes continued. "Each species it destroys makes it smarter and more dangerous. The aliens say it has already absorbed the knowledge of dozens of civilizations." Marcus studied the tactical information with eyes that had learned to find weakness and things that seemed invincible. "What do we know about the aliens asking for help?" "They call themselves the Zephyrian Collective. They are an ancient species that has never developed weapons of war. Their entire culture is built around creation and knowledge preservation. They have technology far beyond ours, but they have no experience with combat or warfare." Torres, the radiation specialist, pointed at one of the images. "The swarm moves like the crystal eaters on Gamma-7, but those were just animals. This thing thinks in plans." "The aliens detected our military broadcasts," Hayes said. "They specifically requested help from Earth because our signals showed evidence of weapons technology and combat experience. They think humans might be the only species capable of fighting something like this." Santos, who could move unseen even in daylight, asked the question they were all thinking. "What is the real threat assessment? How long before this thing reaches human space?" Admiral Hayes paused before answering. "According to the alien calculations, the Void Swarm is moving toward populated areas of the galaxy. If it maintains its current speed and feeding pattern, it could reach our outer colonies in 50 years. Earth itself would be threatened in less than a century." The hunters exchanged looks. 50 years seemed like a long time to normal people, but they understood that threats like this had to be stopped as far away as possible. If the swarm continued to grow and learn, it would become unstoppable. Chun closed his eyes and reached out with his psychic senses toward the alien signal that was still being received upstairs. What he felt made him open his eyes quickly and look concerned. There's something else, Chun said quietly. I can sense emotions in the alien transmission. They are not just afraid of the swarm. They are afraid of something the swarm is running. The room became very quiet. Admiral Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean, something the swarm is running from? The fear pattern is complex, Chun explained. The aliens are terrified of the swarm, yes. But underneath that terror is something else. They know something about why the swarm exists. Something they have not told us. Marcus turned to Admiral Hayes. We need to speak with the aliens directly. The message was one-way communication. We need to establish real contact. That may be possible, Hayes replied. Dr. Chen and her team are working on sending a response using the same quantum tunneling method the aliens used to reach us. But it will take time. Elena stood up and walked to one of the wall displays showing star maps. Time is something we do not have. If this swarm is as dangerous as the aliens claim, every day we wait means more civilizations die. What are you suggesting? Hayes asked. Marcus answered for the group. We go to them. We take a ship to the Kepler 442 system and assess the situation firsthand. These aliens may have technology we can use, but they need tactical knowledge we possess. The journey would take months, even with our fastest ships, Hayes pointed out. Torres smiled grimly. Admiral, we spent years alone on worlds that tried to kill us every minute of every day. A few months in space will feel like a vacation. Admiral. Hayes looked at the 10 hunters standing before her. They had been created to be humanity's ultimate weapons, forged in conditions that would break normal people. Now they were volunteering to travel across impossible distances to fight something that had destroyed entire civilizations. I need to discuss this with the Global Defense Council, Hayes said. A mission like this would require resources and authorization at the highest levels. While you discuss it, Marcus said, we need to start preparations. We will need weapons designed for fighting something that can exist in multiple dimensions. We will need ship modifications for combat in deep space. And we will need to study everything the aliens have told us about this swarm. Maria Santos spoke up from where she had been silently observing. We also need to consider that this might be a trap. We have only the aliens' word about what this swarm really is. Chun shook his head. The fear I sensed was real. But Santos is right to be cautious. We should be prepared for the possibility that the situation is more complicated than we have been told. Admiral Hayes nodded. I will begin preparations for the mission while seeking approval. In the meantime, I want all of you to undergo full medical evaluation and combat readiness testing. You have been in suspension for 20 years. We need to know that your abilities are still intact. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Admiral, we were designed to survive things that should be impossible to survive. 20 years of sleep is not going to make us weak. Marcus looked at his fellow hunters and then back at Admiral Hayes. Give us 48 hours to run combat simulations and equipment tests. Then we will be ready to travel to alien space and face whatever is waiting there. As the hunters left the briefing room to begin their preparations, Admiral Hayes remained behind, staring at the images of destroyed worlds. She wondered if she was about to send Earth's most dangerous weapons to save the galaxy, or if she was about to lose humanity's best hope against an enemy they did not yet understand. Either way, the decision was made. The hunters were going back to war. The starship Cerberus cut through space toward the Kepler 442 system. It was not like any ship humans had built before. The hull was made from materials the hunters had discovered on their Dreadworld missions. Metal that could bend without breaking. Armor that absorbed energy attacks and weapons that fired concentrated pieces of the void itself. Marcus stood on the bridge watching the stars streak past. The journey had taken 4 months, but the hunters had used the time well. They had trained together, planned their approach, and studied every piece of information about the void swarm. Captain Rivera, called out Lieutenant Davis from the communications station. We are receiving multiple distress signals from the target system. Some are Zephyrian, but others are from species we have never heard of. Marcus walked over to the communications console. The speakers filled with voices speaking in dozens of different languages. All of them sounded afraid. All of them were calling for help that was not coming. How many different species? Marcus asked. At least 12 that I can identify, Davis replied. But the translator is having trouble with some of the signals. They are too damaged or filled with interference. Elena moved to the tactical display and pointed at what she was seeing. Look at the system layout. 3 planets are completely dark. No heat signatures, no electromagnetic activity. They are dead worlds now. Chun closed his eyes and reached out with his psychic abilities toward the system ahead of them. What he felt made him step back in shock. There is so much pain, he whispered. So much fear and death. And something else. Something that feels like hunger but bigger than any hunger should be. Torres was monitoring the radiation scanners. I am picking up energy signatures that do not match any known physics. Whatever this swarm is, it operates on principles we do not understand. Santos appeared beside Marcus without making a sound, as was her way. Captain, we need to decide on our approach. Do we go in loud and aggressive, or do we try stealth first? Marcus considered their options. The hunters had 3 main objectives for this mission. First, they needed to evacuate as many Zephyrian survivors as possible. Second, they had to gather intelligence about the Void Swarm. Third, they needed to test whether human weapons and tactics could actually hurt this enemy. We split into 3 teams, Marcus decided. Elena, you take Torres and Jackson to the second planet. Try to find Zephyrian survivors and get them to safety. Jun, you take Maria and David to observe the swarm directly. I want to know how it thinks and how it moves. The rest of us will attempt direct contact with the swarm intelligence. Sir, Lieutenant Davis interrupted. Are you planning to talk to this thing? The alien said it just consumes everything it touches. Marcus smiled the cold smile that had kept him alive on Thanatos Prime. Davis, we have learned to communicate with things that wanted to eat us before. Sometimes the best way to understand a predator is to let it know you are not afraid of it. The Cerberus entered the outer edge of the Kepler 442 system and immediately encountered evidence of the destruction. Debris fields that had once been space stations floated in the vacuum. Twisted metal and crystalline fragments told the story of civilizations that had died fighting. Elena's team took a shuttle toward the second planet, which still showed signs of life. As they approached, they could see the beautiful crystalline cities of the Zephyrians, but they could also see dark patches spreading across the surface like infection. The cities are still singing, Elena reported over the radio. I can hear harmonic resonance from the crystal structures. There are definitely survivors down there. Her team landed near one of the intact city centers. The Zephyrians who met them were unlike anything humans had ever seen. They looked like living glass sculptures, their bodies reflecting light in patterns that somehow conveyed emotion and meaning. The lead Zephyrian approached Elena's team with movements that seemed to flow like water. When it spoke, the words came not from a mouth but from vibrations in its crystalline body. You are the warriors from the distant star, the Zephyrian said. We felt your arrival through the quantum disturbance. We have been hoping you would. Come, Elena nodded. We are here to help. How many of your people are still alive? On this world, perhaps 10,000. But we were once billions across 7 planets. The Devourers came 6 months ago. Each day, more of our cities fall to their hunger. Torres was scanning the approaching dark patches with his radiation detector. Elena, we need to move fast. Whatever those things are, they are putting out energy that will cook anything organic in about 20 minutes. The Zephyrian's body flashed with colors that Elena's enhanced vision interpreted as deep sadness. We have tried to fight, but our people have never known violence. We create, we preserve knowledge, we sing the songs of the universe. We do not know how to kill. Meanwhile, Chain's observation team had positioned themselves on the edge of the system where they could watch the Void Swarm in action. What they saw challenged their understanding of how life could exist. The swarm was not made of individual creatures. It was a single massive organism that could separate itself into smaller parts when needed. Each part could phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. "It is learning," Chun reported. "I can sense its intelligence examining the debris of the ships it destroyed. Every piece of technology it touches becomes part of its knowledge base." Maria Santos watched through her enhanced vision as swarm tendrils reached toward a damaged alien battleship. "Look at how it moves. It is not random. It is testing the ship's defenses before consuming it." David Kim, the team's technology specialist, was recording everything. "The swarm seems to exist in at least 4 dimensions simultaneously. That is why normal weapons cannot hit it consistently. It steps out of our reality when attacked." Back on the Cerberus, Marcus prepared for the most dangerous part of their mission. He was going to attempt direct contact with the swarm intelligence. The plan was insane by any normal military standard, but the hunters had learned that sometimes insane was the only thing that worked. Marcus took a small shuttle and flew directly toward the largest concentration of swarm activity. As he approached, he could see the creatures more clearly. They looked like living shadows with too many angles, shapes that hurt to look at directly. "Cerberus, I am beginning contact protocol," Marcus transmitted. "If this goes wrong, Elena has command of the mission." Marcus opened all communication channels and broadcast on every frequency. "Void Swarm Intelligence. This is Captain Marcus Rivera of the human species. I request dialogue." The response was immediate and terrifying. The swarm suddenly focused its attention on Marcus's shuttle. Hundreds of shadow creatures began moving toward him with purpose. But instead of attacking, they stopped just outside weapon range. Then Marcus heard a voice in his mind. It was not words, but pure meaning transmitted directly into his consciousness. The voice felt ancient and hungry and desperately afraid. "New pattern detected. Unknown species. You carry the scent of survival from impossible places. Why do you not flee?" Marcus forced himself to stay calm even as the alien presence pressed against his thoughts, because running from predators only makes them chase you. "I want to understand what you are and what you want." "Want?" The concept seemed to confuse the swarm intelligence. "We consume, we grow, we survive, that is existence, but you have seen the places between places. You have walked on worlds that unmake lesser life. How are you possible?" Marcus realized that the swarm was not just hungry for matter and energy. It was hungry for understanding. It had absorbed countless civilizations but had never encountered anything like the hunters before. "We are possible because we choose to be," Marcus replied. "We do not just survive. We protect, we preserve, we turn our pain into strength for others." The swarm intelligence was quiet for a long moment. Then it transmitted something that shocked Marcus to his core. "We run from something worse. The silence comes from the spaces between galaxies. It unmakes everything. We consume to grow strong. Enough to fight it, but we are still not strong enough. Nothing is strong enough." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. The void swarm was not the ultimate threat. It was fleeing from something even more terrible. And now both the swarm and humanity might have to face that greater darkness together. "Maybe," Marcus transmitted back, "it is time to stop running and start fighting together." Marcus returned to the Cerberus with information that changed everything. The crew gathered in the main briefing room as he explained what the swarm intelligence had told him. The room was silent when he finished speaking. "So the thing that has been destroying entire civilizations is actually running away from something worse?" Elena asked. Her white hair seemed to glow under the ship's lights as she processed this information. "That is what it claims," Marcus replied, "but we cannot trust it completely. The swarm could be lying to make us lower our defenses." Chun shook his head slowly. "I felt its emotions during the contact. The fear was real. Whatever this silence is, the swarm is terrified of it." Torres pulled up star charts on the main display. If the swarm is telling the truth, we have a bigger problem than just saving the Zephyrians. We might be looking at a threat to the entire galaxy. Santus appeared from the shadows where she had been listening. We need more information before we make any decisions. I suggest we capture one of the smaller swarm creatures and study it. That might be possible, David Kim said from his technology station. I have been analyzing their phase-shifting ability. I think I can modify our containment fields to hold something that exists in multiple dimensions. Marcus considered their options. They had come here to fight the Void Swarm, but now they were learning that the swarm might be necessary for fighting an even greater enemy. The decision they made here could affect the survival of every living thing in the galaxy. Elena, what is the status of the Zephyrian evacuation? Marcus asked. We have rescued about 3,000 so far, Elena reported. But there are still thousands more scattered across the remaining cities. The problem is that the swarm is moving faster now. It seems to know we are here. On the planet below Elena's team was working desperately to save as many Zephyrians as possible. The crystalline beings were unlike any species humans had encountered. Each individual was like a living library, containing thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and culture. The lead Zephyrian, who had introduced himself as Harmonizer, Veltar, explained their situation as Elena's team prepared another group for evacuation. We are not just individuals, Veltar said, his crystal body resonating with sadness. We are connected through quantum resonance. When one of us dies, part of our collective knowledge dies with them. The Devourers do not just kill our bodies. They consume our accumulated wisdom of 1,000,000 years. Elena understood now why saving the Zephyrians was so important. They were not just another alien species. They were living repositories of ancient knowledge that could never be replaced. How much of your knowledge have you already lost? Elena asked. Veltara's color shifted to deep purple, which Elena had learned meant great sorrow. Perhaps 60%. The greatest libraries, the oldest harmonizers, the keepers of the deep songs, all consumed. What remains of our civilization could fit in your single ship? Meanwhile, Chen's observation team had captured one of the smaller swarm creatures using David's modified containment field. The creature was about the size of a human, but looked like a piece of living darkness with too many angles. It is not fighting the containment, Chen reported. In fact, it seems to be trying to communicate. The captured creature pulsed with patterns of light that seemed almost like a language. David ran the patterns through the ship's computer systems, trying to find some way to translate them. I think it is trying to show us something, David said. These light patterns match stellar coordinates. It wants us to look at a specific location in space. Chen reached out with his psychic abilities toward the captured creature. What he felt made him step back in alarm. It is not just showing us coordinates. It is showing us a memory of something that destroyed its home. The main screen filled with images transmitted directly from the creature's consciousness. The hunters saw a galaxy far from their own, filled with thriving civilizations and countless worlds teeming with life. Then they saw the arrival of the Silence. The Silence was not a creature or a species. It was something that existed in the spaces between reality. It moved through the galaxy like a wave of absolute nothingness, unmaking everything it touched. Planets, stars, entire solar systems simply ceased to exist as the Silence passed through them. My God, Torres whispered. It is not just destroying things. It is removing them from reality completely. The memory showed the desperate attempts of that galaxy's civilizations to fight back. Weapons that could crack planets had no effect. Shields that could stop supernovas were useless. The Silence could not be fought because it existed outside the rules that govern normal matter and energy. In the final moments of the memory, they saw the creation of the Void Swarm. The last survivors of that doomed galaxy had built it as a living weapon, something that could exist in multiple dimensions like the Silence itself. But even the swarm had not been strong enough to stop the inevitable. The swarm escaped to our galaxy, Chun realized. It has been consuming civilizations here, trying to grow strong enough to fight the Silence when it eventually follows. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. How long before this silence reaches our galaxy? The captured creature pulsed with new patterns. David translated as quickly as he could. It says the silence moves slowly between galaxies, but it has already begun the journey. The swarm estimates we have perhaps 50 years before it arrives in our local stellar group. Santos emerged from the shadows where she had been thinking. 50 years to prepare for something that destroyed an entire galaxy. We need to consider the possibility that the swarm is right. We might need to work together. Elena's voice came over the communication system from the planet below. Captain, we have a problem. The swarm has stopped its advance toward the remaining cities. Instead, it is gathering into a massive formation. I think it is preparing for some kind of major action. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing the swarm's movement patterns. The creatures were indeed forming into a configuration they had not seen before. It looked almost like they were preparing for battle, but there was no enemy visible except for the human ships. Chun, can you sense what the swarm is planning? Marcus asked. Chun closed his eyes and reached out toward the massive intelligence below. It is not planning to attack us. It is preparing to show us something it thinks we need to see. The main swarm formation began to pulse with coordinated light patterns. The display filled with new images, not memories this time, but calculations and projections. The swarm was showing them its analysis of the coming threat. The projections were terrifying. When the silence arrived in their galaxy, it would not just destroy individual worlds. It would unravel the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Stars would stop burning. Gravity would stop working. The basic forces that held atoms together would cease to function. It is showing us the end of everything, Torres said quietly. But then the projections changed. The swarm began showing scenarios where it had grown larger and stronger. In these projections, it had absorbed not just matter and energy, but the survival instincts and combat knowledge of warrior species. Species like humanity. It wants to absorb us, Santos realized. Not to destroy us, but to add our fighting ability to its own collective intelligence. Marcus understood what the swarm was proposing. It wanted to create a partnership where humans would voluntarily allow themselves to be absorbed into the swarm consciousness. In return, they would survive the coming of the silence and help fight against it. The question is, Marcus said, are we willing to give up our individual existence to save the galaxy? Chun opened his eyes and looked at his fellow hunters. There might be another way. On Sci-World Omega, I learned that consciousness can be shared without being absorbed. We might be able to merge our knowledge with the swarm while still remaining ourselves. Elena's voice came over the radio again. Captain, you need to decide quickly. The swarm is moving toward our position. I think it wants an answer to its proposal. Marcus looked at his team, these humans who had been forged in the most hostile environments imaginable. They had volunteered once before to sacrifice their normal lives for the protection of humanity. Now they faced an even greater choice. If we do this, Marcus said, we will be changing what it means to be human. We will be creating something new. Torres smiled grimly. Captain, we stopped being normal humans the day we volunteered for the Dreadworlds. The question is not whether we change. The question is whether we change into something that can save everyone else. Marcus made his decision. Signal the swarm. Tell them we are willing to try the consciousness merge. But we do it our way, with our safeguards, and we maintain our individual identities. The fate of the galaxy now depended on whether humanity's most dangerous weapons could become something even more powerful by working with their former enemy. The consciousness merge began in the deepest part of space between the Zephyrian homeworld and its dying star. Marcus and his team floated in specially designed pods while the void swarm surrounded them with tendrils of living shadow. Chun was the first to make contact. His psychic abilities, developed on Sci-World Omega, allowed him to bridge the gap between human consciousness and the swarm's collective intelligence. What he experienced was beyond anything he had imagined. The swarm's mind was not one voice but millions. Chun felt the memories and knowledge of every species the swarm had ever absorbed. He experienced the final moments of civilizations that had fought desperately against the silence. He felt their fear, their hope, and their determination to survive, but Chin also imposed his own mental discipline on the connection. He had learned on the psychic predator world that consciousness could be shared without being lost. He maintained his individual identity while accessing the swarm's vast knowledge. "I can feel them all," Chun transmitted to his team. "Every species that ever lived in the dead galaxy, they are still here, still conscious inside the swarm. They have been waiting for someone who could hear them properly." Elena was next to join the merge. Her enhanced senses, developed in the eternal cold of Hell's Gate, allowed her to perceive the energy patterns that held the swarm together. She found that she could navigate through the collective consciousness like moving through a vast frozen landscape. "The swarm is not just a weapon," Elena reported. "It is a living memorial." Every absorbed civilization contributed something unique to its knowledge base. But they need something more. They need hope. One by one, the other hunters joined the consciousness merge. Each brought their own survival skills and mental strengths developed on different dreadworlds. Torres brought his understanding of radiation and energy. Santos brought her ability to move unseen through dangerous territory. Jackson brought his knowledge of adaptation and survival, but it was Marcus who made the most important discovery. As the leader of the hunters, he had learned not just how to survive impossible conditions, but how to inspire others to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. When Marcus joined the merge, something unexpected happened. The swarm's collective despair began to change. For the first time in eons, the absorbed civilizations felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt the possibility of victory. "You carry something we lost long ago," the swarm intelligence communicated to Marcus. "You carry the belief that any enemy can be defeated if you are willing to pay the price." Marcus felt the weight of 1,000,000 extinct civilizations looking to him for leadership. But he also felt their combined knowledge and power flowing through his consciousness. The swarm had absorbed the technology of countless advanced species. It knew scientific principles that humanity had not even theorized about. "Show me everything you know about the silence," Marcus requested. The information that flowed into his mind was overwhelming. The silence was not from their universe at all. It came from the spaces between realities where the normal laws of physics did not apply. It fed on existence itself, growing stronger with every atom of matter it unmade, but Marcus also saw something the swarm had not understood before. The silence had a weakness. It could only unmake things that followed the normal rules of reality. Things that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, like the swarm itself, were harder for it to erase completely. "The Dreadworlds," Marcus realized suddenly. "That is why we were sent to the Dreadworlds. Not just to make us better fighters, but to teach us how to exist in places that follow different rules." Elena understood immediately. The acid storms on Thanatos Prime existed partially outside normal space. The psychic predators on Omega operated in mental dimensions. "We have been training to fight something like the silence our entire lives." The consciousness merge deepened as the hunters shared their Dreadworld experiences with the swarm. For the first time, the collective intelligence felt what it was like to survive in places where survival should be impossible. They learned about human determination, about the refusal to give up even when defeat seemed certain. Chun made the breakthrough that changed everything. "We do not need to become the swarm," he announced. "We need to teach it to become more like us." The process that followed was unlike anything that had ever been attempted. Instead of the swarm absorbing human consciousness, the hunters began reprogramming the swarm's fundamental nature. They taught it to value individual identity while maintaining collective knowledge. They showed it how to hope instead of just surviving. The transformation was not gentle. The swarm fought against the changes, its ancient programming resisting the new concepts the hunters were introducing. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around them as something that had existed as pure hunger for millions of years learned to become something more. Elena felt the swarm's pain as it struggled to understand concepts like sacrifice for others and fighting for principles instead of just survival. It hurts to change, she communicated to the collective intelligence, but growth always hurts. Torres helped the swarm understand that true strength came not from consuming everything, but from protecting what was valuable. Santos taught it that sometimes the best victory came from enemies who never knew you were there. Jackson showed it how to adapt and evolve in real time, but it was Marcus who provided the final piece of the transformation. He shared with the swarm the most important lesson the Dreadworlds had taught him. Sometimes the only way to defeat an impossible enemy was to become impossible yourself. The change, when it came, was visible across the entire star system. The dark tendrils of the void swarm began to pulse with new patterns of light. The chaotic movement of its creatures became organized and purposeful. For the first time in its existence, the swarm was not just reacting to threats. It was planning for victory. The Zephyrians on the planet below felt the change through their quantum resonance. Veltar contacted the Cerberus with wonder in his harmonic voice. The destroyer has become a protector. How is this possible? Because, Marcus replied, still connected to the swarm consciousness, sometimes the most dangerous predator can become the best guardian if it learns what is worth protecting. The merged consciousness began planning for the arrival of the silence. The swarm's vast knowledge combined with human tactical thinking and the hunter's experience with impossible enemies. They designed new types of weapons that could exist in multiple dimensions. They planned strategies that used the laws of physics as weapons themselves, but they also did something more important. They began spreading the transformation throughout the galaxy. Other swarm fragments in distant systems started changing as the new programming propagated through quantum connections. What had once been a force of pure destruction became a living defense network. The hunters eventually returned to their individual bodies, but they maintained their connection to the swarm consciousness. They had become something new, no longer just human, but not fully absorbed into the collective either. They were bridges between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness. We need to return to Earth, Marcus announced to his team. We have 50 years to prepare our entire species for what is coming. Elena nodded, her white hair now showing patterns of light that reflected her connection to the swarm. Earth's military needs to know that the next war will not be fought with normal weapons or normal soldiers. Chin smiled, his psychic abilities now enhanced by connection to millions of absorbed minds. We will need to create more hunters. Not just warriors who can survive on Dreadworlds, but people who can exist between realities. As the Cerberus prepared to leave the Kepler 442 system, Marcus looked back at what they had accomplished. They had not just saved the Zephyrians or defeated the Void Swarm. They had transformed humanity's greatest enemy into its strongest ally. The rescued Zephyrians would return to Earth with the hunters, bringing their vast knowledge of peaceful technologies. The reformed swarm would spread throughout the galaxy, teaching other species how to prepare for the coming of the silence. When the ultimate darkness finally arrived from the spaces between galaxies, it would find not a collection of helpless civilizations, but a unified defense that had learned to exist beyond the normal rules of reality. The hunters had gone to space to fight monsters. Instead, they had learned how to turn monsters into heroes. And in doing so, they had given the galaxy its first real hope of survival against the infinite dark. Marcus looked at his team and felt pride. That went beyond human emotion. They had started as Earth's most dangerous weapons. Now they were something far more powerful. They were the galaxy's guardians, forged in the fires of impossible worlds and tempered by the wisdom of 1,000,000 extinct civilizations. The real battle was still 50 years away. But for the first time since the silence had begun its journey between galaxies, the universe had a chance to win.